In my previous life, everything seemed to fall apart a month before I got engaged to my childhood friend, David. Another friend of ours, Anya, stood crying at her doorstep. One rainy evening, confessing she had secretly loved him for years. She begged for a chance to win his heart, but David refused. We moved forward without trouble, got married, and built our life together. However, Anna never gave up. Like a pesky mosquito buzzing in the night, she kept trying, wearing us down until she finally left a scar neither of us could erase. It all ended one fateful day. Anna, now pregnant, came to our house glowing with excitement and triumph. She declared her dominance, smugly announcing, "David said he's going to divorce you." "I'm pregnant." Her words stung, but I remained calm, ignoring her as I opened the door. My indifference must have enraged her because, in the heat of the moment, she pushed me. My high heels wobbled, and I tumbled down the stairs. Pain exploded in my head as I hit the floor, and warm blood trickled down my face. Before everything went dark, I saw David and his mother rushing not to me but to her. Their only concern was her and the baby she carried. When I opened my eyes again, I wasn't in the hospital. I wasn't even in my adult life. I was back in high school, sitting in a classroom, wearing my summer uniform. The sound of cicadas buzzed in the distance, blending with the laughter of students outside. I felt dizzy and disoriented. The last thing I remembered was holding the divorce agreement before everything spiraled. Yet here I was, back in time, staring at a younger version of myself. The sound of footsteps broke my daze. A bottle of water was placed on my desk, and a familiar voice spoke. "Did you get heat stroke? You barely made it through gym class. What's wrong?" I looked up to see David years younger, his face full of concern. It was the same David I'd once loved, the same David who later abandoned me when I needed him most. His presence churned up old memories, bitter and fresh. "Lucia?" David waved a hand in front of my face. "You don't have a fever, do you?" I felt a laugh bubbling up, cold and bitter. Was this a dream? A cruel joke my subconscious had crafted? Before I could respond, another voice chimed in Anna's. She rushed into the classroom with exaggerated concern. "Lucia, are you okay? I heard you almost fainted during gym. You scared me." Her words were sweet, but her actions betrayed her. She casually brushed against David, seeking his attention like she always had. How had I been so blind? I thought Anna was a friend, a sister even. I trusted her with my secrets, helped her with her studies, and even brought her into my life with David. All the while, she was in love with him. She had been playing a long game, biding her time. This time, though, I wouldn't let her win. Everything would be different. Anya became the uninvited third wheel in my marriage. Once her fake innocence faded, she dropped all pretense. She'd wait for David outside his office, bring him homemade lunches, buy him thoughtful gifts, and always fuss over him like a devoted partner. Her actions screamed that she loved him more than I ever could. But David despised her persistence. He blocked her, refused to see her, and returned or threw away everything she sent him. 6 months later, Anna came to me in tears. She dropped to her knees, begging for forgiveness. She claimed she'd lost her mind, promised to stop chasing David, and pleaded for us to be friends again. I wasn't foolish enough to trust her after everything she'd done. Neither was David, at least, not at first. But life has a way of wearing people down. The endless routine of marriage and raising children exposed the cracks in our relationship, and Anna slipped into them like a virus. Slowly, David began to bring her up in conversations. At first, it was subtle, a mention here, a comparison there. Over time, he'd talk about how understanding Anna was, how she cooked meals just for him. Whenever my cooking fell short, he'd casually point out Anna's skills. Those small cracks widened, and the presence of a third person turned minor marital squabbles into gaping wounds. Our fights became more frequent, and David stopped coming home some nights. When I confronted him, he cried, apologized, and swore he loved me. But I could see the truth. He was trapped by Anna's sweetness, her calculated submission, and his own weakness. I couldn't bear the betrayal any longer. I went to a lawyer alone and drafted the divorce papers. I had plans to move to a new city and start fresh. But before I could escape, Anna's jealousy pushed me down the stairs, leaving me to die with the memory of David choosing her over me. When I opened my eyes, I was back in high school. It wasn't a dream I had been reborn. Heaven, in its mercy, must have pitied my blindness in my past life. I had been given a second chance, a chance to rewrite my story from the moment Anna entered my life. It was the second year of high school, the time when Anna first transferred to our school. Her family had paid for her admission after she failed the entrance exam, and she had spent the previous year at a third-rate school. She struggled academically, and whenever she got low grades, she'd hide in the bathroom to cry. High school can be cruel, and Anna became an easy target for bullies. They'd lock her in the bathroom, pour water on her, and mock her, calling her crybaby. I was the one who found her. I chased away the bullies and gave her my spare clothes. She cried and thanked me, looking so helpless that I couldn't bear to leave her alone. I decided to be her friend, thinking I was doing the right thing. As the student council president, I had some influence in school. My kindness towards Anna made others treat her better, and even David, because of me, began looking out for her. Growing up, my parents always told me, when you offer a rose, its fragrance lingers on your hands. I believed those words and made it my mission to help others. When Anna asked for help with her grades, I included her in the study group David and I were part of. Together, we worked hard until she improved enough to get into a local university. But David's college entrance results weren't great. Out of love, I gave up my dream university and enrolled in a local one to stay with him. Now, looking back, I realize how blind I was. Every choice I made for others came at my own expense. This time, I wouldn't let history repeat itself. The opportunity to study abroad for my master's degree had been within reach. But once again, I chose to stay for David. Looking back, every decision I made in those days seems like a foolish sacrifice. Thankfully, life has given me a second chance. And this time, I can rewrite my story. The bell signaling the end of class snapped me out of my thoughts. David and Anna approached together, as always. Anna's eyes lit up as she asked eagerly, "Are we reviewing English together in the study group today?" I grabbed my backpack and stood. "I'm going home." Anna blinked in surprise. "Why?" "There are still 2 evening study periods left." David stepped closer, concern flickering across his face. "Are you still feeling bad from the heat stroke earlier?" He reached out, his hand hovering just inches from my forehead. I stepped back, avoiding his touch. His hand froze in midair, the concern on his face turning to confusion. "I'm just a little tired," I said calmly. "I've already told the teacher I'll be leaving early." David hesitated. "Then I'll walk you home. Wait here while there's no need." I cut him off, slinging my bag over my shoulder. Without giving him another glance, I walked out of the classroom. When I reached my apartment building, Mrs. Wang was taking out the trash. Her face lit up when she saw me. "Lucia, you're home early today," she said warmly. "Oh, and stop by later. I just made some fresh puff pastry cookies. They're still warm." I paused, looking at her. In my past life, I had thought Mrs. Wang was the ideal mother-in-law kind, supportive and doting. But once David and I struggled to have children, her warmth turned icy. She pushed David toward Anna, planting poisonous seeds in his mind with words like, You can't let her ruin your life. Try with someone else. When I fell down the stairs, it was her voice I heard first, fretting over Anna and her unborn child. I gave her a polite smile. "Thank you, Mrs. Wang," I said as I walked past her. "But I don't like puff pastry cookies." Her expression froze in shock as I closed the front door behind me. Inside, I placed my bag down and stood in front of the mirror, staring at my reflection. My 17-year-old self stared back, eyes filled with determination. Maybe this second chance wasn't just about avoiding the mistakes I made in love and marriage. Perhaps it was about something more, about chasing the dreams I had buried deep inside. As I pondered, my mother returned from work, and to my surprise, David was with her. "I met David downstairs," my mom said, worry lining her face. "He told me you left school early because you weren't feeling well." "Why didn't you call me?" She hurried over and pressed her hand to my forehead. "Are you feeling better now?" "I'm fine," I assured her with a smile. "I was just a little hot earlier." "Don't worry." David placed a pot on the table. "Your mom made green bean soup for you, and I brought it up. It's refreshing. Drink it once it cools." "Oh, and I made some puff pastry cookies too." "You're too kind," my mom said, smiling at him. David glanced at me. "If you're feeling better, we could do our homework together tonight." In my past life, David and I had often studied together. We lived in adjoining apartments, and our nightly study sessions became a routine. But in this life, I wanted none of that. I refused to walk the same path that had led me to pain and betrayal. "David," I said softly, "I've been feeling a bit overwhelmed lately. I think I'll study on my own for a while. I'm also leaving the study group." He looked stunned, but I didn't waver. Over the following nights, I studied alone. I worked through exercises by myself, focusing entirely on my goals. It felt liberating to break free from the ties of the past. This time, I wasn't going to let anyone or anything stand in the way of my dreams. David used to wait for me after class, but I often left early with my desk partner to grab some water or use the bathroom. When Anna came over to ask me something, I'd usually brush her off, saying I was busy. One weekend, David showed up at my door. He looked annoyed. "What's going on with you?" he asked. "Why did you suddenly stop talking to Anna and me?" "What did we do?" I sighed. "You're overreacting. It's almost the end of the semester, and I just want to study alone." "Overreacting?" His voice got louder. "Everyone in class can see you're ignoring me. Do you think I'm blind or deaf?" I hesitated for a moment. Then I blurted out, "David, do you like me?" His face went blank. "What?" "I don't like you," I said bluntly. "Even though we've grown up together and spent 17 years as friends, I don't feel anything more than that." He looked confused. "Who said I like you?" "I only see you as a lifelong friend." "Well, that's good then," I said softly. His expression turned dark. "Don't flatter yourself," he snapped. "I was just worried about you as a friend. But now you're accusing me of having feelings for you." "Fine. You want to study alone? From now on, we'll go our separate ways." "Okay," I whisper, watching him walk away angrily. I felt a pang of guilt for 17-year-old David. He hadn't done anything wrong yet, but I couldn't forget what I knew about the future. I couldn't let myself stay close to him, knowing how it would all end. It was better for both of us to part ways now, even if it felt unfair. From that day on, David stopped looking for me. Anna, noticing I wasn't paying attention to her either, turned to David instead. I overheard him tell her loudly, "It doesn't matter. We'll make our own study group. Our grades will improve without anyone's help." He wasn't wrong. Nobody depends on anyone in this world. A few days later, our head teacher, Mr. Zhang, called me to his office. "Lucia, it seems you haven't been helping your classmates much lately," he said, adjusting his glasses. I frowned. What do you mean, sir? I heard you quit the class study group, he said. Yes, I did. I prefer studying alone, I replied. He sighed. Lucia, being a good student isn't just about grades. It's about having good moral character, too. Selfish behavior isn't acceptable. Professor, I said carefully, I don't see how wanting to study alone makes me selfish. I'm still helping other classmates when they ask for it, like my desk partner or the student sitting near me. He looked at me for a moment, then changed the subject. Lucia, I was planning to nominate you for the city's Exemplary Student Award this year. Do you know what it takes to be a good student? It's not just about your grades, but also your attitude and morals. I smiled politely. Professor Zhang, last year I won the award because the class and school voted for me fairly. I have no problem with it being done the same way this year. And as I said, I'm still helping others in class. I don't think my morals are in question. If I were still 17, his words might have made me feel guilty, like I wasn't doing enough. But inside, I was a 27-year-old who had been through much tougher situations. A lecture like this wasn't going to bother me. Realizing he couldn't change my mind, Professor Zhang let me go back to class. But later that afternoon, during our tutoring session, he announced something unexpected. We'll be switching seats, he said. The study groups have shown great results, with many students improving their grades in the last exam. Professor Zhang stood at the podium, his voice echoing through the classroom. As the semester comes to an end, we'll be introducing a system where classmates help each other. This will improve everyone's performance and foster teamwork. This year, the Exemplary Student Award will focus on moral education, and how much you help improve your classmates' grades will be a key factor in the selection process. He started reading out names and reassigning seats. When he got to mine, I was paired with Anna. Lucia, Anna said softly, clutching her backpack. She gave me an awkward smile, trying to sound kind. Don't worry. I'll work hard to improve my grades so you can win the Exemplary Student Award again. I couldn't help but find the whole situation ironic. Professor Zhang, with his flashy new luxury watch, gestured dramatically from the podium. The watch caught my eye, and I instantly connected the dots. Anna's family sold luxury watches. I realized what was going on. In my past life, Professor Zhang hadn't interfered much in class matters, but he always went out of his way to support Anna. Back then, I had unknowingly helped her grades improve, and by the end of the year, she'd climbed to the top 100 in our grade. But Anna wasn't exactly a strong student. Her foundations were shaky, and if it hadn't been for my patience, no one else in the class would have bothered to help her. Even David, when we studied together, would direct most of his questions to me, rarely assisting Anna. When I quit the study group, Anna had seemed relieved at first, but as time passed, she realized David had little patience with her struggles, and without me, the convenient helper, her progress slowed. Now, they were trying to pressure me into tutoring Anna again, using the Exemplary Student Award as leverage. And Professor Zhang's shiny new watch? A not-so-subtle thank-you gift from Anna's family. After class, I went straight to Professor Zhang's office. Professor, I'd like to request a seat change. I don't want Anna as my desk partner. His face darkened immediately. Lucia, what's wrong with you? Didn't you tell me you enjoy helping your classmates? First, you quit the study group, and now you want to change seats too? Look around. Do you think anyone else has your privileges? Professor, I interrupted, keeping my tone calm. Do you love every person in the world? What? He stammered, caught off guard. People always have those they like, and those they don't, I explained. I can help my classmates, but I don't have to like Anna. I don't want to help her anymore. Professor Zhang's frustration grew. You can't just choose who you help. This seating arrangement was based on grades and directly ties into the Exemplary Student Award. If you switch, it wouldn't be fair to others. Why are you only thinking about yourself? I let out a cold laugh. The Exemplary Student Award again? I said dryly. Well then, I give up. I don't want to be considered for the award this year. His jaw dropped. What did you say? I said I'm giving up my candidacy for the Exemplary Student Award, I repeated. You don't have to assign me a new partner. I'll sit alone. Alone? He shouted, trembling with anger. Selfish. Ungrateful. I'm doing this for your own good. If you don't learn how to cooperate now, you'll suffer when you go out into the real world. I'm teaching you how to be a better person. Thank you, Professor, I said, keeping my voice steady. But I already know how to be a good person. The first rule is to not sacrifice myself just to please others. That's just an excuse for your selfishness. He barked. As the student council president, you should set an example for others. You should care about group success. If Anna improves her grades, our class could become the top performing one this year. Don't you care about your classmates' votes? I gave him a small smile. Professor, compulsory education ends with high school. I'm paying tuition here to study, not to work for others. If underperforming students improve, or if the class wins an award, that's not my responsibility. It's yours. His face turned red. But I continued calmly. If I do my job well as student council president, I'll be judged by my actions, just as you'll be evaluated by other teachers. So please, let me focus on what matters to me. If you want me to help you with your job, you should first talk to my parents and figure out how much you're willing to pay me. If the salary is fair, I'd be happy to help. You're interested in work at such a young age? He pointed at me with his finger. Don't think just being a good student is enough. Trust me, girls usually start to fall behind in their senior year. That's not true, teacher. A voice came from the door. I turned around and saw a boy leaning lazily against the doorframe, spinning a basketball in his hands. At our school, 3 of the last 5 top students were girls. It's not right for a teacher to say things like that without any proof. Professor Zhang was furious. George, what does it matter to you? You're from the social studies class. This is a natural science class. So it was George, the boy who always came first in social studies, and was most likely going to be the best student of the year. He shrugged and walked into the office. The professor just said that being a good person is important for students. I had to step in when I saw this classmate being treated unfairly, he said. Professor Zhang didn't know what to say. His face turned red with anger. Everyone knew George didn't take anyone's nonsense. Even his tutor gave him space, so Professor Zhang had no choice but to back off. Suddenly, he pointed at me again. I try my best for you guys, and yet it seems like you'll only be happy if I'm upset. I stayed calm and said, Don't worry, Professor. I won't upset you much. I've decided to switch to social sciences next year. Both Professor Zhang and George looked stunned. Professor Zhang chuckled. Do you really think someone can just switch from natural sciences to social sciences on a whim? George looked at me too. Are you serious? I am, I replied. My parents will come to sign the papers in a few days. Professor Zhang laughed again. You think you can just switch subjects like that? Like it's no big deal? Ignoring him, I left the office. I could still hear his teasing as I walked away. If you really switch, I'll write my name backwards. Back in the classroom, I moved my desk to the back row. Anna watched me, her eyes red and swollen, as if she thought I was stalking her. My classmates just stared, and only David came over. What are you doing? He asked, frowning. Isn't it obvious? I replied, moving my things. Did the teacher allow it? He asked. I shrugged. He didn't say anything. David looked at me while I packed up my things, then sighed. "Come outside with me." We stepped into the hallway. Why take it out on Anna just because we argued? That's not fair. I smiled. Take it out on Anna? I'm just moving my seat. I don't want to waste time helping her. That's all. I started to walk back to class, but David stopped me. What's wrong with you? How did you become so selfish? He asked. Let me go, I frowned. Okay. But please don't do this anymore, he said, biting his lip. I admit it. I started walking home with Anna, just to make you jealous. But you can't react like this. He lowered his voice. You should learn from Anna. She's always so kind and thinks about others. Your attitude is so hard to deal with. Only I can put up with it. I stared at him. It was clear whether I was 17 or 27. David would always be the same. Anna's sweetness and obedience always pleased him, while I had to live with his criticism. David's love always felt condescending, like a spinning top that couldn't stop. No matter what I did, it was never enough. If I didn't do things the way he wanted or fast enough, he would always compare me to Anna. Look at how well she does everything. And yet, I'm still giving my love to you, and you're complaining. But I never wanted this kind of love. David, I said softly. What? He asked, not understanding. I shook my head. A piece of advice. Focus on your studies in your senior year. Do more practice exams, and try to reduce your stress. That way, you'll get into a good university. I returned to class. That was all I could do for him. The rest was up to him. When I got home, Wang's mother was sitting on the sofa while my mom was talking on the phone. Yes, I'm sorry, Professor Zhang. I understand. I know my daughter acted impulsively. Don't worry, I haven't reported it to the school. Okay. When she hung up, my mom had a mixed expression. The teacher says you want to change to social sciences? She asked. I nodded. Change to social sciences? Wang's mother jumped in. Listen to Auntie, that's not a good idea. You're almost in your 3rd year. Professor Zhang said you had an argument with him today and want to sit alone. Did something happen? My mom asked. I shook my head. Mom, I want to study social sciences and get into the faculty of journalism at Peking University. Peking University? Wang's mother interrupted again. That's a tough one to get into. Lucia, Auntie is telling you that journalism isn't a good field for a girl. It's not safe and doesn't pay well. A girl should study something like accounting. It's a stable job. She's right, my mom added. In our local universities, the accounting departments are great, and Peking University is so far away. It's better to stay close to home so you and David can be together and visit on weekends. I had heard these same things in my past life. Wang's mother always pushed me to stay close to home. David's mother didn't like going out because of her legs and preferred that David study nearby. And since I was the perfect daughter-in-law in her eyes, she thought it was safer for me to study close to home as well. Back then, I was so blinded by love and these repeated suggestions that I ended up studying accounting at a local university. You're an only child. You should stay close to your parents, they'd say. You and David have grown up together. There's no better guy than him. You should get married soon after graduation. Girls don't need big ambitions. Stability is what matters most. Family comes first, and girls should have children soon. It's better for their health. I was brainwashed by these ideas. After graduation, I found a mediocre job and married David. I even questioned myself for not being able to get pregnant. 5 years into our marriage, Wang's treatment of me got worse because I couldn't have kids. One day, I overheard her talking to David. Son, even though you're married, you don't have to settle for just her. We should have done a fertility test before marriage. Who knew she couldn't have children? Maybe it's not Lucia. Maybe it's me, David said. It can't be your fault, Wang's voice rose. I'm telling you, Lucia's like this because you always gave her whatever she wanted. But Anna is different. She brings me things, and she's much nicer. It's not like it used to be. Divorce is an option. You guys are always fighting. Just try with Anna. If she gets pregnant, you can divorce Lucia and stay with Anna. Those words hit me hard. Memories came rushing back as Wang's mother kept talking, filling the air with her opinions about life. In this world, most people are ordinary. You shouldn't aim too high. Girls should seek stability, find a good family, and get married early. Like the saying goes, learning well is no better than marrying well. I interrupted her, tired of hearing her narrow view. Mrs. Wang, most people are ordinary, but they still have dreams. Dreaming isn't aiming too high, and a woman's worth isn't defined by getting married or having children. If you read more, you'd understand the important roles women have played in history. She looked at me, annoyed. Not everyone can change the course of history. You young people are influenced by those foreign thoughts and think you're special. Then, turning to my mom, she said, Lucia, I told you to be careful. Your daughter's thinking is changing. These children can be dangerous when brainwashed. I couldn't take it anymore. Am I being brainwashed by the internet, or is it you who is brainwashing my family? Her face twisted in anger. What are you saying? I took a deep breath and replied, You come to my house and tell my mom that a girl shouldn't marry far away, that she shouldn't have ambitions, that she should get married soon. Why do you want to control my life? How can you be so ungrateful? I've watched you grow up. I care about you. If I wasn't so busy, I wouldn't even bother. She snapped back. If you're so busy, please mind your own business and stop coming to my house, I said, my voice cold. Wang's mother stood up, looking surprised and at a loss for words. All right, I'm leaving. I won't come back to your house, she muttered. But before she could leave, I stepped forward and took my mom's hand. Thank you, Mrs. Wang. I'm about to enter my senior year, and I want a quiet environment to study. Wang's mother left, her face red with anger. As she walked out, she shot one last look at my mom, full of disdain. Lucia, you must control your daughter. After Wang's mother left, my mom sighed, looking a little worried. Why are you so upset today? My parents were always open-minded, but even good people can be influenced by others. I led my mom to my room and showed her the collection of journalism books on my shelf. Mom, you know I've always been interested in journalism. The university entrance exam is important, but it's not the only way to change your life. In the past, I thought natural sciences were the best path because they offer more job opportunities and better prospects. But I've always liked social sciences more. I've thought about this carefully. Even though I focused on natural sciences in my sophomore year, I was always interested in social sciences. I wasn't behind in them, and I can catch up over the summer before senior year. I want to switch to the social sciences class and give it my all to try and get into Peking University. It's a risk, but I'm willing to take it. My mom looked at me quietly for a moment, then patted me on the shoulder. All right, we'll talk to your dad tonight. I hugged her tightly. Thanks, Mom. That night, we talked with my parents about my decision. The next day, my mom took me to sign the papers with Professor Zhang. As we walked into his office, he scoffed. Students and their parents can be so stubborn. It's ridiculous. With a smile, my mom replied, as parents, we believe in supporting and trusting our children's decisions, not discouraging them. Walking out of the office, I felt happy and free. I knew there was a chance I might fail, but at least I had my parents' support, and I was following the path I truly wanted. On the first day of senior year, I ran into George outside the social studies 1 classroom. "I didn't expect you to actually come," he said, raising an eyebrow. "Welcome." When David found out I had switched to the social studies class, he was furious. "Why didn't you consult me?" he added with a smirk. I was quiet for a moment before answering. "David, this is my personal decision. Besides my parents, I don't have to consult with anyone else." "Very well." He chuckled coldly. "I guess we're done then." The school year started with a tough assessment exam, maybe to make us nervous. It was a hard one. A week later, the results came out, and I ended up in 11th place in my social studies class. The entire senior department was buzzing about it. When Professor Exu called me to his office, I overheard Professor Zhang say, "She just transferred. There's no way she could have gotten such a good grade in social studies." Another voice added, "She's really proud. Probably cheated to avoid looking bad. We should look into this." I knocked on the door, and the conversation stopped. Professor Exu smiled at me and motioned for me to come in. "Lucia, your performance on this exam was excellent. We teachers are curious about how you managed to improve your grades so quickly." Professor Zhang laughed from a corner. I took a moment to think, then asked seriously, "Professor Exu, is there anyone who thinks I cheated?" Professor Exu hesitated. "Well, honestly, you just transferred, and getting 11th place has made some teachers wonder." I smiled. "Professor Exu, do you know how I spent my summer?" I explained. "I locked myself in my room the whole summer. No distractions. I bought study materials and old social studies exams, working through them day and night, from 8 a.m. to midnight. I get the curiosity, but I won't accept baseless accusations of cheating," I said firmly. "If something seems off, it should be checked." "What proof do you have that I cheated?" Professor Zhang chimed in. "There were teachers watching the exam, and there are security cameras. Why not ask the supervisors or check the recordings?" Professor Zhang's voice got more agitated. "See, Professor Exu? She's so defiant," he added. "She's getting too arrogant because of her success. We should call her parents." But Professor Exu ignored him. "Lucia, I trust you. Keep doing your best." Professor Zhang looked stunned. "Professor Exu, you're young. You don't understand how cunning some students can be." He shook his head. "You can't risk honesty when it comes to social science group 1 grades." At that moment, George, who was helping Professor Exu with some documents, suddenly spoke up. "Did you forget something?" "What?" Professor Zhang asked. George, with his bright and innocent eyes, smiled. "That day in the office, you said if Lucia switched to social sciences, you'd write her last name backwards. Are you doing that now?" The other teachers couldn't hold back their laughter. One even burst out laughing. Professor Exu smiled and said, "Professor Zhang, maybe it's better if you leave the social science group to us." A minute later, George and I left the office. "Lucia." I turned around. "You're more interesting than I thought," he said, hands in his pockets. "I've always found school boring, with no one really challenging me. But now, I'm actually looking forward to it." "Looking forward to what?" I asked, confused. He smiled. "The day we meet at the top." From that day on, my life was all about studying. I heard bits and pieces of gossip from the natural science group, like how Anna was now chasing after David. Maybe my transfer had pushed her to act sooner than she did in my past life. But this life was different. In the past, Anna became David's escape from marriage, with me as the contrast. But now, with me in social studies, Anna's desperate pursuit of the mediocre student only made David feel embarrassed. He had no time to help her improve her grades or offer her any warmth. The pressure of senior year wasn't easy, and Anna was once again the joke of the class. But what I didn't expect was for her to take her frustration over David rejecting her out on me. For the past 2 weeks, the girls sitting to my left had been loudly chatting while I tried to study. These were the same girls who used to bully Anna, and now it seemed like I was their new target. One day after class, I saw Anna walking with them, and they were acting suspiciously. They all wore fancy wristwatches, and during break, they cornered me in a bathroom stall, throwing a bucket of cold water over me. I was drenched from head to toe. One of them laughed and said, "Everything comes in its time." I stayed quiet in the bathroom for a while, then asked for a towel when someone opened the door. I went to the infirmary to dry off my clothes. Afterward, I returned to the bathroom, grabbed a bucket, and filled it with water. As I walked into the classroom, I could hear the girls laughing. I walked straight up to them and poured the entire bucket of water over them. They screamed in shock. "Is that all you can do?" I said, smiling. "Sorry, but I always make people pay for their actions." "You're crazy," they yelled. "We'll report you to the teacher." I laughed coldly. "The one who should report someone is me," I said. "Are you really still playing these bullying games?" One of them shouted, "If you're brave enough, don't sit here." I replied, "I'm going to keep bothering you. I don't like how you act. You're not the student council president anymore, so stop acting so important. We're not scared of you. The whole class knows you're a cheater. Why are you bragging so much?" Suddenly, a voice came from the back of the classroom. The room went silent. It was George, lazily standing up and walking toward us. One of the girls, wiping water from her face, said, "Yes, she harasses us. And you know she's a cheater. We don't want to sit with someone like that." The other girls waited, expecting him to side with them. George nodded and then looked at me. "Actually, I don't think this is the best environment for you. You don't need to prove you're innocent at such an important time in senior year. Do you want to sit with me instead?" "What?" I gasped, and the other girls did too. I had heard about George from the first day. He was known for being good-looking, smart, and sharp-tongued. Several girls had tried to approach him, but he always shut them down with harsh comments, leaving them in tears. Over time, no one dared to talk to him, and his seat was always empty. This was the first time I had ever heard of someone asking him to be their desk partner. Anyone would be crazy to turn down that opportunity. "Sure," I said, nodding. "Let's go." He grabbed my backpack, and together we moved my desk next to his while the whole class watched. Of course, Anna and her group wouldn't give up that easily. To avoid more trouble during this critical time, I was thinking of asking my dad to pick me up after night classes when George spoke up. "When I helped Professor Xu organize some papers, I saw your address. You live at 15 Feng Street, right?" I nodded. "I live on the back street," he said. "Night classes go until 9 starting next week. Do you want to walk home with me? It would be perfect." "Thanks," I said. "And by the way, you got 11th place in the last exam, right?" "Yes. 11th place isn't enough for Puking University," he said, handing me a notebook full of mistakes. "I don't need these exercises anymore. You can use them if you want as a reference." Just then, the bell rang, signaling the end of night class. George stood up and grabbed his basketball. "George," I called out. He turned around. "I heard you never get involved in other people's business." "That's true, but you're not just an outsider anymore," he said, looking lazy and cool. "What?" I raised an eyebrow as he smiled just a little. "Nice to meet you, partner." Chapter 15. A genius's mistake notebook is more valuable than any study materials. Over the next month, I studied even harder, going through the methods and strategies for solving problems that George had given me. When the first monthly exam of senior year came, I moved up to 8th place in the class. The rumors about me cheating on the initial assessment exam finally started to fade away, and my bond with Harry grew stronger. The results of the city's outstanding student assessment were announced. Although I wasn't nominated as an exemplary student by the natural science group, the teachers in the student department nominated me as an outstanding leading student, and I got recognized for my efforts. I overheard that when the results were announced, Professor Zhang threw his outstanding professor cup across the office in frustration. On October 11, the school held an autumn competition. While I was getting some water, I saw Professor Zhang and Anna talking to a man in a suspicious way behind the main building. I paused and then ducked into an empty classroom on the first floor, crouched by the window, and turned on the recorder on my phone. Professor Zhang, with Anna's grades, it's hard for her to get into a good university here. As we discussed earlier, could you help improve her scores on the daily assessments? That way, we could make her application to a university abroad look better. I understand. It's tough to manipulate the final exam results now, but I can help with the daily assessments. Thank you so much. We've tried private tutors, but there have been no good results. The best thing would be to assign her to work with good students. If her grades improve by the final exam, it would be perfect. About the previous girl, Lucia was really difficult. We should probably leave her out of this. I'll find someone else. My daughter can't keep feeling like this. Don't worry. I'll find a way to punish her and give her a detention. It's no big deal. Thank you. Here's this watch. Oh, you really shouldn't make unnecessary expenses, Mr. Han. It's not an important detail. When their footsteps faded away, I stood up with sweaty hands, ready to leave the classroom. But then I heard a voice. Listening so blatantly without caring if anyone sees you? I jumped in fright, looking up to see George standing there. I almost died of fright. What are you doing here? I asked, surprised. What do you mean? What am I doing here? He said, amused. If you're going to be an undercover reporter, you might want to learn the basics. You left the classroom door open and crouched down by the wall. Did you want everyone to see you? Oh? I blinked. So, anyone saw me? Silly. Of course not. He crossed his arms. I was here the whole time. Chapter 16 the next day, just before morning exercises started. The school radio station broadcasted a strange recording. The recording featured Professor Zhang, the tutor for the natural science group, and Anna's father. The station director, George, explained that it had been an accident during a live broadcast. We received a mysterious recorder, he shrugged. I wanted to share it with everyone, but I forgot to turn off the microphone. Professor Zhang was suspended and banned from participating in any assessments or awards. The recording was uploaded to the internet by some students, and within an hour, it went viral. Internet users turned into detectives, and aside from former students accusing Professor Zhang of giving better treatment to wealthier students, they started investigating Anna's family. Isn't that the store that sells fake watches? I bought a watch there. They said it was second-hand, but it was actually fake. The Han family's company was investigated, and the police got involved. They discovered that not only were they manufacturing and selling counterfeit products, but they were also involved in money laundering. The school started looking into whether Anna had been leading a bullying group. When the girls were asked about it, they cried and admitted that Anna had given them watches and told them to bully me. Anya quickly became the joke of the school and soon left. The saddest part was that the watch Professor Zhang always admired was actually a fake. The day after Anna was expelled, I saw David standing outside my building in the afternoon. He apologized, saying, "I'm sorry, Lucia. I didn't know she was so cruel. I hated her too." He twisted his hands nervously. "Can we make up?" He was holding a bottle of strawberry milk, my favorite from before. But when I saw it, it reminded me of a painful memory from my past life. I had come home early from a business trip and found the bottle of milk I expected to be in the fridge, sitting on the table. There was a lipstick mark on it, and the room smelled awful. like something that had been left in a hurry. They didn't even clean up after themselves. Since then, I could never bring myself to drink strawberry milk again. As the memory hit me, I felt a wave of nausea. I quickly turned away and vomited. David rushed over to help, but I stopped him. "I'm sorry," I said, trying to stay calm. "I don't like that milk anymore." He looked confused. "Should I get you something else?" he stammered. I shook my head. "It's not something you can change," I said, smiling. "David, I think it's best we don't see each other for a while. I hope you do well in your exams and everything else." "Is it because of George?" he suddenly asked. "What?" I replied. "You like George. That's why you followed him to the social studies group? Now you sit with him and walk with him after class, right?" His voice was rising. "David, George, and I are just classmates. I've told you, I just want to focus on my studies." He laughed bitterly. "Your childhood friend can't compete with someone new, huh?" He threw the bottle of milk aside, looking hurt. "I never thought you'd be like this. A lot of girls like George. He's not a good choice." His face darkened. "Lucia, if you don't choose me, you'll regret it one day." From that day on, David treated me like a stranger. He became more focused on his studies and improved his exam results. Wang's mother couldn't stop bragging around the neighborhood, saying, with those grades, he can get into any university. In the final exam of the semester, my grade stayed second in the class. The second semester flew by with mock exams, and then the college entrance exam came in June. I felt like I had done well. After the exam, I compared answers with George and felt confident about my results. We both had a good chance of getting into Peking University. When the results were posted, George had come in first in the city, and I was 8th. We both received multiple offers from universities. I chose journalism at Peking University, and George chose history at the same school. I heard David did well too, and got into the best university in the city, much better than the one he chose in my past life. But I also heard he got sick after the exam, and Wang's mother took care of all his application details. It turned out that David's graduation party and mine were on the same day, at the same restaurant. David and his mother were standing across from us at the entrance. She was smiling widely, but David looked upset, with an unshaven beard. "Choosing a university is not as important as choosing the right major," Wang's mother said. "I picked the best major for David finance, so he can make a lot of money." As she said this, she shot a pointed look at our table. "Like those two from Peking University? Journalism and history? No matter how good the university is, they won't find jobs." My mom was about to argue back, but I stopped her. "What's wrong with that woman? I can't believe I was friends with her for all these years. Is Peking University not good enough for her?" I muttered, annoyed. "Don't pay attention to her," I said, trying to calm my mom down. Wang's mother kept talking, saying girls like Lucia will line up to marry David. I'm already worried about how to find him the perfect wife. She pulled David along, still chatting away. "David, didn't you bring your admission letter? Show it to your aunts." David shook his head, but when his eyes met mine, there was something in his gaze sadness. "Maybe?" "Stop shaking your head." Wang's mother took his backpack, but it slipped out of her hands, and everything inside fell to the floor. An older lady helped pick things up. "Oh, this must be the admission letter," the lady said, picking something up. "What's this? Azoospermia? What's that?" "What?" Someone gasped, and another woman covered her mouth. "Oh, David can't have children? That's going to make it hard for him to find a partner." "Stop talking nonsense." Wang's mother grabbed the medical report from the lady. "When did you have this test?" David didn't seem fazed. He simply said, "It's not fake. I have azoospermia. I can't have children." "Shut up," Wang's mother yelled. slapping him on the back. "Go back inside right now." David gave a bitter laugh. Even though his mother was yelling at him, he walked away without looking back. Chapter 19. I suddenly realized something. "David?" I called, following him. He turned around, his eyes full of tears. His voice was barely a whisper. "Lucia, you remember everything from our past life too, don't you?" I asked quietly. He didn't answer, but he rushed over and hugged me tightly. "I had a really long dream," he said, tears streaming down his face. "In the dream, I betrayed you. I thought Anna and I were going to have a child, but the child wasn't mine. Anna pushed you down the stairs, and I didn't help you. Then I found out the child wasn't mine. We fought, and she stabbed me with scissors. And that was it. In my past life, David never took a test, but I did. The results showed there was no problem with his ability to have children. But before I could tell him, I found out about his affair with Anna. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry, Lucia," he cried. "But that was just a dream, right?" I gently pushed him away. "David, that wasn't just a dream. The pain was real. The blood was real. It all really happened. If you were still the David who didn't remember anything, maybe we could have been classmates or friends," I said. "But now that you remember, we can't even be that. I don't want to bring the hate from our past life into this one. Being strangers is the best I can offer. I hope that in this life, you'll be a better person," I said, my voice cold. I didn't feel sorry for him. If he could have had children and if the child had been his in the past life, he would have been happy with Anna. Never expect that someone's misfortune or their regrets will make them appreciate you. That kind of late regret is meaningless compared to the opportunities life offers. Chapter 20. That night, Wang's mother screamed and cried at home for hours. Everyone in the building could hear her. Then, at 9 o'clock in the evening, a small stone hit my window. I opened the window and looked down. There was George, standing under the streetlight, holding a small bouquet of flowers, looking like something out of a fairy tale. I quickly changed my clothes and rushed downstairs. "Why didn't you just text me? Who knocks on windows like this these days?" I laughed. He shrugged and said, "I just wanted to see if you could hear it." We exchanged smiles. "I'm going on a trip with my parents tomorrow, so the next time we see each other will be at Peking University," he said. I nodded. "Yeah. And these flowers." He cleared his throat. "They're called lilies of the valley. I passed a flower shop and saw them. I thought the meaning of the flower suited you, so I bought them." He handed me the bouquet. "I don't think I ever told you, but congratulations on getting into Peking University." "Same to you," I smiled as I accepted the flowers. "Well, you should go back inside. See you at Peking University," he said, turning to leave. "See you at Peking University?" I repeated. As I watched him walk away, I thought about what he had said the lilies of the valley had a meaning that suited me. But he never told me what it was. I quickly pulled out my phone and searched. The meaning of the flowers popped up right away. Friendship, hope for reunion. And also, rebirth. In September, I started at the Peking University School of Journalism. Our first class with the veteran professor was a wake-up call. "If any of you want to make a lot of money in the future, you still have time to switch careers," he said with a smile. "But as journalists, your sense of social responsibility is what matters most. You'll need to master many skills interviews: writing, layout, video production." I was busy non-stop, and so was George. He was still a big deal at school, and at Peking University, he stood out even more. Some girls in my class, when they found out we were high school classmates, asked if I could introduce them to him. I excitedly went to ask George, but he refused flatly. "Why don't you meet them?" "That girl is really nice. I don't want to meet anyone," he said. Lots of girls ask what kind of girlfriend you'd like. What's your type? I asked. He didn't even look up from his book. I don't want a girlfriend, he said. Why? I was confused. You don't have a boyfriend either. That's because I'm busy, he replied. Me too, I said. But he just closed his book and said, I'm busy too. So, until senior year, George never had a girlfriend. Some girls started to wonder about his orientation and asked me secretly if he liked men. I thought about it for a moment and replied, I don't think so. Then you like him, they said. Seriously, besides you, we've never seen George with any other girl. After graduation, I got an offer from a well-known university abroad to study for a master's in journalism, while George stayed at Peking University to pursue his PhD. The day I left Beijing, George came to the airport to say goodbye. As I stood there, an intense feeling rushed over me. I realized something I had been too hurt in my past life to take a chance on love again. But what if this time it was him? Would it be worth trying? I squeezed my hands together and suddenly looked up at him. George, I said, gazing into his clear eyes. Do you like me? He froze for a second, then smiled. Lucia, do you know why soap operas have 100 episodes? What? I asked, confused. Because they never say what they want to say, he replied with a grin. If you're so direct, what's left to write in history? He teased. Don't be funny, I said, feeling upset. Do you like me or not? If not, forget it. Hey, are you mad already? George smiled and grabbed my arm. I just thought it would be a shame. Actually, I already bought the ticket for the next flight. I was going to surprise you when I arrived. What? I was confused. I've always been waiting for the day you would want to fall in love, he said softly. He pulled out a bookmark from his pocket with a beautifully pressed lily of the valley flower on it. Then, in his magnetic voice, he said, I love you. George and I were in a long-distance relationship for 3 years. After that, I returned to the country and became a social news journalist. 2 years later, George earned his PhD and stayed on as a professor at the university. He was promoted to associate professor in less than 2 years. I continued my passion for journalism, earning several recognitions for my work. Meanwhile, George became a guest on a history show, with his eloquent comments earning him the nickname George the Historian from netizens. He quickly became recognized as a new outstanding voice from Peking University. When I switched to the social science group in high school, George had said he hoped we would meet at the top. Years later, we both found ourselves at the top of our respective fields, constantly pushing forward and exploring new peaks. A year after that, we got married. A new cycle of university entrance exams was starting, and our old high school invited us to give a talk. While we were waiting for George to buy water, I ran into David, holding a little boy by the hand. He came over to greet me. I always see you on TV and the internet, David smiled. You seem to have done really well these years. I nodded. I've been teaching in the mountains these years. This is my adopted son, he said, introducing the boy. We chatted briefly before he left with the child. When George returned, he narrowed his eyes at David's retreating figure. David? Did he come to look for you? He asked. I laughed. We met by chance. So Professor Liu gets jealous of old stories too? George snorted, clearly not amused. By the way, I tugged at his sleeve. I remember you once bought me a bouquet of lilies of the valley. Was it at that flower shop over there? He looked at me, then muttered, You're so slow. Do you think a small flower shop has such a rare flower? Huh? I asked, puzzled. I bought it online, he said. I had to search through several stores. It was hard to find. I blinked in surprise. Wow, George. Did you secretly love me back then? To my surprise, He blushed and squeezed my hand tightly. "Well," he said, avoiding my eyes, "let's go now or we'll be late." It was so fun. We were married, and he was still blushing. So different from the distant and haughty Professor Liu I knew from school. When we returned to my high school, I learned that George had become a legend there over the years. After our talk, we were asked to leave a message for the students about to take the entrance exam. I thought for a moment and wrote, "Through love comes passion. Believe in yourselves. I hope to see you at the top."